tagged again. This time, my top 10 90s books in my collection. Stay tuned. What's going on, comic friends? It's Ryan the Colossus Collector, and thank you once again for stopping by my channel. So this week, I got tagged in another one of Alan the Comic Geek's Friday comic book challenges, this time by the immortal Biggie Shack right here. Check him out. Subscribe to his channel. He does great live streams on Friday with the Collectors Club. I've been on there a few times. They have a great game called Comic Book Poker, where we have to show certain kinds of books in our collection, and the audience, the chat votes on the best set for that challenge. It's really fun, but he also has a lot of other great content. Check his channel out, and don't forget to subscribe to him. But he participated in this Friday comic book challenge from Alan over at Comic Collectors Geek, and this week's challenge was your top 10 90s comic books in your collection. Of course, a couple weeks ago, I participated in the same challenge, only it was top 10 bronze books in your collection. So now I get to show my top 10 90s. I'm pretty excited about it. 90s was obviously a great time in my life. It's the decade I grew up in, and the decade I became a Marvel fan. So many great things like the X-Men cartoon of the 90s, the Spider-Man cartoon of the 90s. As you know, if you follow my channel, I love the arcade, the X-Men arcade game from the 90s. And then also was the decade I got exposed to comics. I started collecting a little bit. So all my roots in the comic world, in the Marvel world, really started in the 90s. So it's a cool decade to look back on and go through my books, kind of try and pick which 90s books are my top 10. At first I thought it was really easy, and then I started looking again through a few more boxes, like, oh shoot, I have quite a few that I would have loved to have put in this top 10. Sadly, I picked only 10, but I actually got a couple of honorable mentions as well. So let's get into those books now. All right, so the first honorable mention is Infinity Gauntlet #1. This is, of course, the first book in the Infinity Gauntlet series and saga special event. It's also the story that the whole first saga in the MCU was based off of. Thanos and the Infinity Gems, or the Infinity Stones, as you know from the movies. Great story. I've got the trade paperback of this too. I've read it. It's really good. And I love this cover, Jim Starlin goodness. And I really just like to. I wanted to keep it in the top 10. It was for a little while, and then I found a few more books, and I was like, oh, I gotta get those in there. So I couldn't do this video without at least showing it. Honorable mention to Infinity Gauntlet #1. And then the next honorable mention is a book that's been very popular this year, Spider-Man 2099 #1, the first appearance of Spider-Man 2099. Obviously, this is kicked off in popularity because of the sequel to Into the Spider-Verse, the Miles Morales movie, animation movie, and it's been very popular. I got this, I don't know if I got this just before or in the midst of the popularity, but I got it at a pretty good price. I think I got it just before it popped off, but a really nice book, and a good 90s key, especially given this year's popularity, so wanted to throw it in the honorable mentions. Okay, so starting off at 10, I actually cheated a little bit in this top 10. I got a couple instances where the books are grouped together. So in this one, I'll add another stand. I've got Spider-Man #1, artwork by Todd McFarlane. And of course, there were a few different variant covers to this. I don't have them all. I have the silver edition, which I just really like. And then I have the regular edition. But what's really cool about this one is that the webbing on this cover is purple. In the just plain or original version, it was gray. But there were some printer errors along the way, and some of them came out purple, and the purple is more rare. It's just a production kind of error book. People don't really talk about it much. I look it up on Cover Price, and it's not even an option to look at. But I definitely think the purple webbing is a pretty important part of this book, so it's definitely one I want to get graded. As you can see, it's still in the poly bag, so it's definitely going to need a press. But yeah, it's just a really iconic book of the 90s. It's kicked off the 90s. It's from 1990, and it's Todd McFarlane, so can't go wrong with this at number 10. At number 9, this is a book you've seen on my channel recently, but can't keep it out just because it's been shown recently. It's Lethal Protector #1, the first solo titled book for the character Venom. I won't go into too much detail on this. Mark Bagley cover. Talked about it a little bit in my recent Venom video, but just a cool book. I've got it in the 9.8. So it's also important to me because of that, because of the grade, because of the coolness factor of it, the fact that Venom's my third favorite character in the Marvel Universe. Definitely kept this in, and this is my number 9 book in my top 10 90s books in my collection. All right, another grouping of books. This might be a little bit of a cheat, but I've got Ghost Rider number 28 and number 31, and this is the first cameo and first full appearance of the Midnight Suns. I've got them both in a 9.8, graded them myself, so they kind of have a special place in my heart that I went out, hunted, found as many copies of these two books as I could, and got them in 9.8s on my own, as opposed to buying them in slabs already. So I like them for those reasons. I love the covers. I also just think Midnight Suns is an inevitability when it comes to the MCU. So I think it's cool to have these books before they eventually do become a group of characters in the MCU. I think they'll be so cool on live screen or on live film, and I'm really looking forward to that arrival. But yeah, just really like these books. I think these are underrated 90s keys. CGC doesn't even, put the key significance on the slabs, which I think is complete nonsense, and would like them to change that. So CGC, if you're listening or watching, let's get that fixed. So really love these books, and these are my number 8 books in my collection of 90s books. All right, next up, number 7. This is X-Men number 11. This was shipped in an X-Men board game. So this is actually a variant print, a second print of X-Men 11, artwork by Jim Lee, the last X-Men book Jim Lee worked on in his X-Men series before leaving the title. It's a 7.0, which is pretty low for a 90s book, but I gotta say, this book is not a 7.0. Something happened. I've talked about it a while back on my channel when I showed this slab. It's it's not a 7.0. So this will get cracked and resubmitted at some point. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but I just think it's such a cool book. I love the silver as opposed to the orangey red on the original. Also a great cover, but I just think the silver is really cool. And just, this is also extra rare. And one of the reasons also this book is a little bit more rare and high grade is because it was just loose in a board game. And so a lot of them got dinged up, you know, stresses on the spine, different defects. So, you know, I've looked up the grader's notes on this. It doesn't say anything interior. I've looked it up and down. It's at minimum a 9.0 in my opinion. I think it's probably a 9.4, but we'll see. I'm gonna crack it and submit it, and you'll find out when I get it back. So that's my number 7 book of my 90s books. All right, moving along here, we've got X-Men number 4 in a 9.8. This is the first appearance of Omega Red. It's great. He's not fully on the cover, but you see his hand, you see his tentacles. A really cool cover by Jim Lee. And I've always loved this book. When I got back into comics last year, this is one of the ones I chased hard in a 9.8. I wanted this one in a 9.8. You know, when it comes to villains in the X-Men universe, I'm really high on Mr. Sinister, and then right after it, it's Omega Red. I think those two are the unused big-time villains in the X-Men universe, in the X-Men world. It's a matter of time before they get on film in the MCU. When finally X-Men come, I think Sinister is probably your best bet to be the first, at least the first big bad, or maybe the big bad of their first saga. Who knows? I wouldn't be surprised if Omega Red pops up at some point. Really cool villain, strong ties and a lot of rivalry with Wolverine, and we know Wolverine's what stirs the drink. It's what brings all the people to the movie theaters. So a villain with strong ties to Wolverine is always a good bet that he'll be in the mix at some point. So really like Omega Red as a villain. But then I also just love this book. I think the cover's great, and I'm really happy that I have it in a 9.8 and see it every day on my wall. It's a great 90s book, and really happy to have it in my collection. So that's number 6 in my collection. All right. Number 5 is Iron Man 282, first appearance of War Machine and the War Machine armor. Of course, James Rhodes is War Machine, as we know, but this isn't the first time he puts on the War Machine armor. This is just the first appearance of War Machine with this epic, iconic 90s art on the cover with War Machine and spray paint over the Iron Man logo. Super cool. I think most people who collect books of this era love this book, love this cover, and it's a must get for anybody who loves comics of this era. So really excited to have this in my collection, and I'm glad I had this still here, because this one's getting shipped off for grading very soon. So glad I could get this in the video before it's off. Really cool book, and this is my number 5 book of my 90s books in my collection. Okay, so we had to fast forward through that a little bit, but this is my number 4 in my 90s collection. I selected this entire cover lineup because they're all the same book. It's X-Men number 1. It's the first book that kicked off the new X-Men, adjectiveless X-Men run with Chris Claremont writing, Jim Lee art, and it's just an iconic book. It's the highest selling comic book of all time. So it's not a rare book by any means. I'm sure most people who collect X-Men have at least 10 to 15 copies of these books in varying numbers. I know I do, but I love having them all in a 9/8, all doing this connecting cover kind of mural on my wall. It's the whole X-Men team, all the characters I love, and then this Magneto end cover is epic. I think this is my favorite one, but I love all of them as a collection. And yeah, I couldn't have a 90s list without this epic lineup of covers. Just pure nostalgia and pure love of X-Men for these books. So this is my number 4 book or books in my 90s collection. All right, number 3, we've got Amazing Spider-Man 361. And this is, of course, the first appearance of Carnage. I think this is a pretty important 90s key. There's not a lot of huge 90s keys. Obviously, first Deadpool is a big one, is probably the biggest one, but in my opinion, as a character, this is a pretty big key. Carnage is a pretty well-known, established, well-used villain of Spider-Man, and obviously huge connections also to Venom, who's become a star character in his own right as well. So Carnage is right behind Venom, and definitely a big villain in the pantheon of Spider-Man villains in the Rogues Gallery. So first Carnage, definitely a big 90s book in my opinion, and it's my number 3 book on my top 10 90s comic book list. All right, so number 2 might be a controversial decision. I wouldn't say this is one of huge value compared to some of the books that just came previously, but this is X-Men number 5, and this is artwork by Jim Lee. This is the second appearance of Omega Red. His first cover, but if I had a gun to my head and needed to pick a favorite cover of the 90s, I think this one would be it. It is so amazing, such an intense, crazy looking battle cover between Wolverine and Omega Red. I just love this cover. It's just such good artwork by Jim Lee. He was totally on his game when he drew this up. I'm kind of in awe of this book, this cover. I'm chasing a 9/8. It's been hard to get one. Graded this one myself, but no cigar on this one. So I'm definitely going to find it eventually. There's no shortage of copies of this book, being that it's a 90s book, and it's an X-Men book. So really love this cover art. It's why it's number 2. And yeah, I'm hunting that 9/8. And finally, my number 1 90s book in my collection, it had to be this one. It's the biggest one I got. It's X-Men 266, first appearance of Gambit. It's not my favorite cover. It's not my favorite book, but it's the biggest one, and it's the most significant 90s book I have in my collection. Made in 1992, so it's right at the start of the decade. As you can see from all the books I showed, they're all early 90s books. I just think that was the best time, and the greatest keys came from that era. But yeah, the first Gambit. Gambit's become just a really huge character since this book came out. I think only the first Deadpool is bigger when it comes to the 90s books in Marvel. And yeah, have it in a 9.6. Got it graded myself. Obviously a 9.8 would be fantastic, but a 9.6 is no slouch. It's a big book, and to have it in such a high grade is really great. So just love having this one. Could not put this any lower than number one on my top 10. So that's my top 10 90s comic books in my collection. Hope you really enjoyed the books. Thank you once again to the Immortal Biggie Shaq for the tag, and to Comic Collector Geek Allen for the challenge in general. Your Friday comic challenges are great, so keep those going. And before I tag a few more content creators to keep the challenge going, I'd like to please just ask you, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Really would appreciate your support. And don't forget to comment and like on the video. The more you comment and like on this video, the more my channel grows. So really appreciate your support. And don't forget, subscribing and commenting on videos will get you eligible for my sick 1,000 subscriber giveaway. I'm giving away a killer prize package. You don't want to miss out on being eligible for that. So please do subscribe and get commenting on videos. Would love to talk with you on the comments, go back and forth. Let me know if there's a couple of books you think I should have got into this top 10. And to keep this challenge going, I'd like to challenge and tag Big B McFly, the comic guy. Would love to see some of your best 90s books, my friend. I'd like to tag Obito Comics. Would love to see what 90s books you've got going in your collection. And I'd like to tag 22 Comics to round out my 3 tags. I would love to see all your top 10s. So keep the challenge going. And thank you once again for watching. If you like this video, maybe check out this top 10 video right here. And like I said, if you subscribe and comment, you might be able to be eligible to win this prize package right here. Check out the video to learn more about that. Until the next time, keep collecting.